I don't usually start with the new customer acquisition because that part's the most expensive. Like all our ideas there, we kind of put on the back burner. Instead, we focus on how are we going to increase frequency, retention, and AOV. Because those it's like lower cost to do. And then you turn to the expensive thing, which is customer acquisition. But you've already built like a better net, right? Before you go and spend money on.
I think you've got a wealth of knowledge to share with us all. I'm interested, let's double tap real quick into the conversation on, you were working in the private equity space, basically doing turnarounds for some of these brands that they'd crossed 9 figures, yet they're losing $10 million or whatever it is on an annual basis. So, and you were successful in turning them around at least to another exit. So, Drew, why don't you walk us through, like, what are some of the lessons that you learned there? What were the failings of those 9-figure brands that were causing them to be unprofitable? And then what were the actions that you took to be able to right that ship? And then maybe some of those things are tangible to even 7-figure, 8-figure entrepreneurs as well.
Yeah, I would say on the revenue side, they've had something going on the revenue side and something going on the cost side. The cost side is almost like the easier side because unsurprisingly, they're all bleeding cash. You go into these Karmaloop, Auto Anything, another one I looked at, and became CEO of, like, they're running, the website's hosted on a server rack in the office, not in the cloud. It's, 20-person engineering teams to run an e-commerce business when we're all on Shopify now and you don't need that. So almost like the cost side is easier to get your head around because it's like, we got to just get this business to off-the-shelf platforms as fast as we can, a standard off-the-shelf stack, Klaviyo, Shopify, and that allows us to take a lot of costs out of the business, right? People costs, software costs, consulting costs, all that stuff. That often is right then enough to get them profitable. But that's typically the first 90 days of running the business. The revenue side's a little bit of a harder nut to crack. In that one, I think all these businesses in general are plagued by one thing, and it's they treat all customers the same. And how, you see that when you log into Klaviyo and you're like, oh my God, you're sending the same 20% off offer to, 2 million people every day off everything on the site. Like they become addicted to discounting. They are sending the same offer to every customer every day, whether they're a new customer, old customer, great customer, bad customer. And what they're doing is like, you're sort of just training everybody to buy on discount. It's like a race to the bottom. Your margins get terrible. Customers aren't going to buy unless there's a big fat discount there. So I think the revenue side, there's a lot of work on really turning over your whole customer list and trying to get better customers in there, not discounting as much. And I write a lot about like whales and minnows. And the general idea is like any business has great customers, that come in, they pay full price, they buy a lot, throughout the year. And then on the other end is, worse customers. We call them minnows, right? They come in, they might return something, they might buy once and return it, And so you see like whales and minnows behave very, very, very differently. They buy different things. You acquire them differently. But a key insight is often that the cost of acquisition of a whale is often the same as the cost of acquisition of a minnow. Bonobos had this famous data case that they published probably like 15 years ago. And it showed they had whales and the customers came in and they bought $15,000 and they started on men's suits. And then they bought like 10 times throughout the year and they spent $15K. On the other side were the minnows. Guys who came in, they bought swimsuits. They bought them once and they never came back. It was like a $35 purchase. They realized the cost of acquisition was the same. So if you want to double the business, like where are you going to put your next marginal dollar? You're going to put it on acquiring more whales if you can. They figured out the whales came to different landing pages on the site through different Facebook or Meta campaigns, right? They're obviously looking more at like suits than at swimsuits. So really they were able to like refocus their marketing and go after the whale customer, and by spending the same amount of money, just sort of catapult their growth. So I think that's a bit of what you have to do on the revenue side.
Yeah, I think that's easier said than done, right,
Oh, yeah,
Drew? I mean,
100%.
yeah, how do you identify those whales? I mean, obviously you're looking into the data, but how do you get granular enough to know this is where they're coming in at? This is exactly what they're purchasing. Because I think most people are just looking at like, hey, was I profitable today? Right. And I think that maybe that's a missing piece in a lot of people's playbook is data intelligence, right? And business intelligence through data analytics. And I think a lot of 7-figure brands don't have that person that's like a data analyst, right? So,
Right.
Drew, how would you approach that?
I mean, you're right. It does get complicated. And I don't want everybody to like tune out from your podcast, but there's this way of profiling your customer that goes back probably, 80 years to like the 1950s when the first catalogs came out. It's called the RFM, recency, frequency, and monetary spend. And really, those are 3 metrics you have on every customer. Recency is like how recently has the customer purchased from you? And it's in days. So if it's like an R0, that means the person purchased today. If it's an R365, they most recently purchased from you a year ago, right? Frequency is the number of times the customer purchased from you, 1 to whatever. And then M is the total spend. This guy spent $50. This woman spent $5,000. And so, I mean, in the old days, Sears catalog, wherever the first catalog was, they would have like a file cabinet with all the customers and like have those RFM scores on each one. But you find that you can use the RFM scores to do all sorts of things. And really, like, you can drop M because R and F tend to predict M. But we just talk about RF scores for your customers. You'll find that the ones that are the most recent and have the highest frequency are going to be your best customers. But they're also, that's true historically. Obviously, this guy bought from me yesterday and she bought from me 20 times is going to be a lot more valuable than a customer who bought from me 2 years ago and bought once. So they're useful historically, but they're also predictive. And that's where it becomes kind of interesting. It's the customer who bought 20 times from me and bought yesterday is more likely to buy from me again than the customer who bought, 5 years ago and bought once, right? It makes intuitive sense, but if you lay out all your customers and you score them, and you can do it in Shopify now with you can sort by recency, frequency. You're really going to look at like, okay, these customers are going to have the highest lifetime value going forward. These are my whales. Let's treat them differently. Let's have a VIP campaign. Let's go out to them and call them and find out what else they want on the site. Like, you start just building your business around that like high future lifetime value cohort. And I think that's a bit of how you get there.
Yeah.
It works not just for purchases, but also for traffic on the site. So you can look at, hey, this ad campaign, this meta ad campaign is driving people who keep visiting my site, high F, and they're very recent. This other meta campaign isn't, so this one is probably going to be a much better meta campaign for me.
Drew, love this conversation. As we wrap things up today, I'd love to leave the audience with 3 actionable takeaways from every episode. So here are the 3 actionable takeaways that I noted. Number 1, if you're an Amazon brand owner, right, and you're Amazon only right now, I think my encouragement to you is to continue doubling down on your business until you get to that 8-figure mark. When you get to that 8-figure mark, then I want you to begin that diversification process. And I say that because that was one of the biggest mistakes that I made, was trying to diversify myself too early when I was worried about some Amazon account suspension, and that never really was going to come to fruition because I wasn't doing anything against their terms of service. So double down on what's currently working. I know what Drew and I talked about, there's some fun, sexy things in here to be like, oh, it'd be fun to get into this D2C game. But I promise you, like if you just get past that 8-figure mark, you'll then have the profits and the ability to go hire A-level players, which Drew just talked about, to be able to execute on these. These are the strategic costs that Drew had mentioned. So that's action item number 1. Action item number 2 is being able to reinvest in yourself and your brand. So looking at your overall marketing costs as a whole and being able to say, hey, this may not have a super high ROAS out the door, but looking at it, you called it the marketing efficiency ratio, right? People refer to it as MER. So look across the board. If you have D2C and Amazon and TikTok and you're in multiple channels, like begin optimizing for that marketing efficiency ratio. So that MER. And then my third and final action item is what can you do to cut costs? I think that profitability, and Drew, you touched on this, like so many people have been chasing the revenue metrics. And my favorite phrase is revenue is vanity and profit is sanity. So if you focus on bringing in the profits to the business, that's going to allow you to grow. It's going to afford you the opportunity to hire really smart people. It will also afford you the opportunity to continue launching new products that will beget further growth in your business. As a CEO, you should be constantly focused on the growth levers that you can pull in your business. And that all comes from the profitability that you're generating in the business. So those are my 3 actionable takeaways for listeners. Drew, anything else that you feel like I missed that we need to give as an action item here?
I think you got to try direct mail when you're ready. Try direct mail. It'll work wonders.
Yes, very good point.
The untapped channel, the big untapped channel out there is direct mail. And I think when you're ready, shoot me an email and we'll get you hooked up.
So Drew, on that note, when do you think people are ready for direct mail? How early is too early?
You know, if I were just starting a new store from scratch, or if I'm only on Amazon, I probably wouldn't bother. I'd say like rule of thumb is probably like 3 million, 5 million in revenue and up. That's when we see it start to work. Higher AOVs work better. You know, home goods, apparel, these kind of categories, CPG, all do really well.
Is there a particular AOV? Like what's your kind of like lowest AOV threshold you would be targeting?
I mean, I like to see over 100, you know. If you were selling like a $20 product, I probably wouldn't lean in on direct mail, or I'd bundle it together and do some things to get the AOV up.
Okay. Great insights. Love that conversation, Drew. All right. My final 3 questions for you here. Number 1, what's been the most influential book that you've read and why?
You know, you mentioned one of them earlier that I had written down, the E-Myth, which I think was just so important for me. I was at a period of my life when I read that where I was in the business and I needed to work on the business. So that book was awesome. Perry Marshall's 80-20 is really like an epic book. It talks about the 80-20 rule for an entire book, but I mean, that's informed a lot of my thinking around whales and minnows and treating customers differently. So any marketer, I think, would do well to read 80-20.
Love that. Great book recommendations. All right. Second question for you, Drew. What's your favorite AI tool or ChatGPT prompt that you've been using?
You know, I switched my default search on Chrome to Perplexity. So Perplexity is like, the promise is that it's current, you know, it's AI, but current, right? Like searches the web. You can ask it some chat-like questions that you'd ask GPT or Claude or something, but it's changed my life. Like you just get exactly the results you want. You can ask it to answer, how would, you know, an Amazon seller think, or how would my ICP think about this question? You get answers back that way. So I'm a big fan of Perplexity.
Yeah, big fan. What are your predictions in Perplexity and its e-commerce space coming up?
I don't know, but increasingly now, I mean, I think for those of us who use it, it's like they're giving me, I do a lot of shopping off of Perplexity. So I used to ask what the best, I don't know, podcasting mic is, and I end up on like a Wirecutter page. But increasingly, Perplexity is doing a great job of kind of breaking it down and assembling reviews from all over the internet. And then you click through and it's right on the purchase page. So I don't know what they make in affiliate revenue off that, but it's just kind of interesting to see them going after Google Shopping like that.
It will be very interesting to see how that turns out over the next 18, 24 months for sure. All right, final question for you here, Drew. Who is somebody that you admire or respect the most in the e-commerce space that other people should be following, and why?
It's the guy I mentioned before we started. He's flown under the radar for probably like 15 years, David Heacock. So he's on X now. He runs one of, if not the biggest e-commerce business I know of, selling filters of all sorts. Filterbuy.com is one of his sites, but he's got several manufacturers in the US, massive logistics business running it. And he's just recently started telling his story. I think he was involved in e-commerce fuel probably 15, 20 years ago, but went dark for a period of time where apparently he did nothing but grow his business, and it shows. So he's a great follow.
Awesome. Great recommendation as well. So another one to check out. Drew, if people want to follow you yourself, they want to learn more about PostPilot and even implement some of that direct mail marketing strategies into their own business, where can people find you?
Yeah, I'm Drew Sanaki on X or LinkedIn.
Easy enough.
Shoot me a
Drew,
DM.
thank you so much for coming on the show today, and we'll drop all those links in the show notes.
Sure thing, Josh. It was great being here. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for listening. Visit EcommBreakthrough.com for more information. If you've enjoyed today's episode, the best way you can show your appreciation is by clicking the subscribe button and quickly leaving a review. See you again next time.